One of the biggest mistakes people make when buying any type of Toyota truck is to assume that it is a Toyota and it is indestructible, so they just go ahead and buy it without checking anything. This is not the case. While they are great cars, especially the older ones, might suffer from normal wear and tear, and to avoid huge bills you need to carry out some important checks. This video will focus on the independent front suspension of these old Toyota trucks and even the new ones, and pretty much will cover the things you need to check out before buying one. This is a bit of a technical topic, so it is mostly aimed towards people who want to do their own pre-purchase inspection, but it will also be informative for anyone who wants to know more about Toyotas. The first thing I would have a look at before buying an independent suspension Toyota would be the ball joints. The ball joints are some of the most important parts on the independent suspension of a Toyota. They have two ball joints, an upper one and a lower one, and their job is essentially to enable the wheel to move up and down while also being able to turn. In extreme cases, when the ball joints fail, the wheel can fall off, especially on these older IFS Toyotas, the Land Cruiser Prado and the 3rd gen 4Runner. In later models, they changed the design and it is more difficult for the wheel to fall off, but it is not impossible. Signs of worn out ball joints include torn boots. However, torn boots don't necessarily mean that the ball joint is bad. The only way to tell is to jack up the vehicle and check for play in the joint itself. The second thing I would check are the control arm bushings. You have 4, 2 on the upper control arm and 2 on the lower, and the same for both sides. The bushings basically cushion the forces from the suspension and into the cabin. Over the years, and especially if the vehicle has been used off-road, those bushings can break or they can wear out, which will lead to extensive movement in the control arms, and while driving you might even feel some instability and hear some clunking. They aren't too difficult to change. I have changed them at home on a vise. However, it is a bit of a time-consuming job and it is a bit difficult. It isn't that straightforward. So if the car you're looking at has worn bushings, it is a good opportunity to lower the price. While the car is on the floor with its weight on the suspension, it is really difficult to check for play in the control arms. However, you can typically tell if the bushings are old just by looking at them. So this will give you an idea of whether you have to change them or not. The next thing I would have a look at would be the tie rods, the inner and outer tie rods. These are responsible for turning the wheels, and of course you want them to be in good condition. They are also a ball joint, but they are on the steering, and detecting play in them is relatively easy. You just have someone sit inside the cabin to rock the wheel left and right while you hold the tie rods, feeling for any play. Basically, if you feel any looseness or play in the joint, it means that the joint is worn out. While you are down there, also have a look at the CV boots. You don't want any torn CV boots because this will enable grease to leak out and water and dirt to get inside the joint, which will wear the joint, and CV joints are pretty expensive. When you take the car for a spin, if you hear extensive clicking while turning and repetitive clicking while turning, this means that one of the two CVs or maybe even both CVs are worn out. Wheel bearings are also worth checking, although it isn't technically a part of the suspension. However, independent front suspension Toyotas do not use the same wheel bearing design as the solid axle ones. They use a pressed design, which means that the bearings are difficult to remove and reinstall, which leads to a labor-intensive and expensive job. So make sure that the wheel bearings are good. Also, if you see any leaking around the handbrake area on the rear axle, this can possibly mean that oil is leaking out of the differential and finding its way through the seals and down the axle housing. This is also a labor-intensive job. So if the car you are going to purchase has oil around the handbrake area, this is also a good opportunity to lower the price, because The part, the seal itself isn't expensive, but the labor to change that seal is actually pretty expensive because you might even need a press to replace those seals. You also want to have a good look at the modifications that have been done to the vehicle you are planning on purchasing. Make sure that the lift isn't over 2 inches, and if it is, make sure that the peripheral upgrades to support that lift have been done. For example, if an IFS Toyota has a lift over 3 inches, make sure it has adjustable upper control arms and a diff drop kit. If it doesn't, it will ride horribly on road, its wheel alignment will be off, so it won't drive well, and it will wear out the tires prematurely, and also it will wear out the CVs and the ball joints because everything would be out of alignment. In my opinion, you're better off getting a vehicle that hasn't been modified at all, or one that has been modified by someone who really knows what they are doing. This is pretty much all I would check on the suspension alone of an IFS Toyota. These systems are great. The Toyota IFS is one of the best independent suspensions out there. However, it uses a lot of different parts, and in many cases those parts tend to be heavy duty to support the weight of these heavy vehicles, which means they are also expensive, and if many of them are worn out, it will lead to a big bill. So make sure that the car you're getting has some work done to it or is in really good condition and won't require those upgrades. Also, as far as ball joints go, never use aftermarket cheap ball joints because they won't last and your wheels will fall off. If you have any other questions regarding the independent suspension of Toyotas, leave them in the comments down below. Thank you for watching, and I will see you on the next one.